Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a full-on autopsy of the 2027 JC Star Level 1 grid connection requirement. And we're doing this by cross-checking the official verified responses directly from the agencies involved, specifically the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, or ANRE, and the IPA Security Center. You know, 2027 is this massive looming deadline for the energy sector. It's the point where these new mandates kick in for countless solar and grid projects across the country. So, let's dive right in and see exactly what happens when you try to force a voluntary product label to act as a mandatory national grid security requirement. Right off the bat, take a look at this smoking gun admission straight from the IPA. Read that carefully. Acquired conformity label does not mean installed and operated safely. Now, this isn't some outside critic saying this. This is the actual operating body of the label explicitly stating the limits of their own certification. Think about how wildly consequential that is for national grid infrastructure. You've got a mandate demanding this label to ensure the grid is safe, but the people issuing it are openly saying, hey, this doesn't actually mean the equipment is installed safely. It's a staggering contradiction, and honestly, it sets the stage for everything we're about to uncover.
Okay, here is our blueprint for today. We'll be looking at 1. The interconnection collision, 2. The boundary defense antinomy, 3. Invisible exceptions and opacity, 4. Secret supply chain checks, 5. The operational meltdown, and finally, 6. A confirmation of nothing.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the interconnection collision. So, during the official inquiry process, someone asked the IPA a totally straightforward question. They asked, if a labeled product is installed in a dangerous configuration, does the effect of the label remain unchanged? And the IPA's response? I do not understand the intent of the question. Now, they weren't just dodging the question here. It was actually this brilliant, unintentional proof of the system's absolute limits. See, in the IPA's framework, the label only looks at product attributes. Installation simply isn't a variable for them. It's kind of like certifying that a car has top-of-the-line brakes, but having literally zero rules about whether the driver actually uses them on the road. Grid security is inherently about how things are installed and connected. But this required label, it doesn't even speak that language. Moving right along to Section 2, the boundary defense antinomy. This perfectly captures the fundamental antinomy, the total contradiction we're dealing with here. On one side, you have ANSIA's regulations, which are entirely built on a boundary defense premise. They actually exclude certain devices from the mandate if they sit behind a gateway because they assume boundary defense inherently lowers the risk. But on the flip side, the IPA explicitly designed this label for a boundary-free reality. The label assumes the device is going to be sitting out there, receiving direct communications from the outside. So what happens in the real world when a rule relying on boundaries uses a certification that assumes there are none? It's a complete mismatch at the most foundational, definitional level of system design. Next up is Section 3, invisible exceptions and opacity. Official responses from the IPA confirmed what we are calling the 3 no's. First, they have absolutely no official view on their label being cited in legal grid requirements. Second, they offer no official statement saying this label doesn't replace actual installation security measures. And third, and this is a big one, there is no distinction on their public list when a label is granted as an exception. According to the guidance, an exception can be granted just to prevent business disadvantages if a competing product is already out there. That means competitors could be getting a free pass to connect to the grid strictly for economic reasons, all while masking it as a rigorous security certification. And for anyone looking at the label, there's zero public distinction between an exception and a standard certification. Well, this is where it gets legally messy. This total lack of transparency directly conflicts with Article 5 of Japan's Administrative Procedure Act. That article strictly requires transparent disclosure of administrative screening criteria and standards. So if grid entry exceptions are being handed out based on undisclosed individual judgments about things like business disadvantages, it violates the very spirit of that exact standard. When an administrative body just bypasses the transparency of its own legal procedures, it completely shreds public trust. We have to know the rules of the game if we're going to trust them with our energy infrastructure, right? And it gets worse, because not only are the criteria invisible, but the sheer scale of these exceptions is completely hidden too. Official responses confirm that exception statistics are not disclosed, and they have absolutely no plans to disclose them in the future. So if downstream power operators have no way of knowing which products bypass the rigorous checks for business reasons, how are they supposed to accurately assess the risk to their own networks? Short answer, they can't. They have zero visibility into what share of grid connection entries relied on these invisible individual judgments. Which bleeds perfectly into Section 4, secret supply chain checks. You literally have to dig into a tiny footnote in Section 1.3 of the conformity criteria to find this, but it's a stunning revelation. Before a label is even issued, inquiries are made to government organizations regarding supply chain risks. Now, obviously, checking supply chain risk for critical infrastructure makes sense, but the issue is there is no published baseline document explaining the criteria or the rules for these inquiries. It's so ironic. A system supposedly designed for standardized security is relying on secret supply chain checks that developers can't prepare for or audit. Basically, the supposedly neutral technical label is just masking non-public government checks that dictate whether you can connect to the grid or not. Okay, let's look at what this actually means on the ground in Section 5, the operational meltdown. Picture this. It's the year 2027. The requirement is officially live. You are a reviewer, and your job is to approve new solar installations for grid connection. Remember, we're talking about thousands of these connections happening constantly. Let's simulate what you will actually have to do to clear just one of them. Step 1, you check the equipment list. Step 2, you immediately realize there's a massive gap because the commercial product model numbers don't match the special JC star identification numbers. So, step 3, you have to open an attached PDF configuration diagram on the product page. Step 4, you manually, physically eye-match the product names and models between the installation setup and the PDF diagram. This entire administrative nightmare completely dismantles ANRE's main excuse for rejecting the vastly superior alternative proposal, which, remember, was based on simple physical configuration checks and self-declarations. ANRE claimed their JC Star mandate would be more efficient. But forcing reviewers to manually eye-match PDFs for every single grid connection, that proves the exact opposite. It's a total operational meltdown. Which leads us to our final verdict today in Section 6, a confirmation of nothing. When you pull it all together, the reality is incredibly stark. Reviewers have to navigate mismatched model numbers. They have to manually read PDF diagrams. They're looking at labels where the exceptions are completely invisible. They're relying on pure manufacturer self-declarations anyway. And worst of all, the label explicitly ignores how the device is actually installed. These 5 verified failure points prove that this mandate demands an immense amount of operational busywork, and it does this at the same operational cost as the superior alternative that ANRE already rejected. Ultimately, you're mandating a check that essentially confirms nothing about the actual security of the grid. And so we come full circle, right back to this devastating admission. The very label required to get onto the grid explicitly does not confirm grid installation safety. The mismatched philosophies, the hidden economic exceptions, the absolute nightmare of manual PDF eye matching, it all points back to this one undeniable fact, verified by the primary source itself. Since this policy objectively fails at its primary goal, we have to ask a crucial question to wrap up this explainer. If the 2027 requirements force this massive operational meltdown on reviewers but confirm absolutely nothing about actual installation safety, how do we pivot? Isn't it time we drop this bureaucratic label checking and move toward a framework based on a practical, verifiable minimum duty of care? If we're truly serious about protecting our energy sector, shouldn't our standards actually confirm the one thing they were designed to protect? Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep asking the tough questions.